Really?
Good evening, everybody, and we're going to call to order the April 8th, 2013 meeting of Stillwater City Council. And first stuff on the docket, we've got some special ceremonies. Councilor Pena, would you meet me down here?
Okay.
We've got a proclamation for you.
Okay.
Whereas Philip Pena was appointed to vacant City Council seat number 2 in April 2012, and whereas Councilor Pena has been a conscientious, dedicated member of the Stillwater City Council, and whereas during his tenure, the City Council completed the following: adoption of a new city code, adoption of Comprehensive Plan 2030, adoption of design and construction standards, adoption of zoning map and zoning classifications, creation of 6 West Incentive District Number 1, and creation of Stillwater Economic Development Authority. Now, therefore, the City Council and the citizens of Stillwater do hereby recognize and express their appreciation for the dedication to duty and service performed by Philip Pena.
I'm that popular or something? What's going on? Thanks again. Appreciate it. Oh, no.
Okay, and now we're going to have 2 different swearing-in ceremonies for new councilors. Our first one will be for Councilor-elect Gina Noble. Judge, Ms. Noble.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. Please state your full name.
I, Gina Noble,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Oklahoma,
and the Constitution of the State of Oklahoma,
and that I will not knowingly receive,
and that I will not knowingly receive,
directly or indirectly,
directly or indirectly,
any money or other valuable thing
any money or other valuable thing
for the performance or non-performance
for the performance or
of
non-performance
any act or duty
of any act or duty
pertaining to my office
pertaining to my office
other than the compensation allowed by law.
other than the compensation allowed by law.
And I further swear
And I further swear
that I will faithfully discharge
that I will faithfully discharge
my duties of the office
my duties of the office
of City of Stillwater Counselor Office Number 2
of City of Stillwater Counselor of Office Number 2
to the best of my abilities.
to the best of my abilities.
Congratulations,
Thank
Counselor.
you.
Come someone. Oh, I never have one. And if you will, sign right there, and then they'll get you taken. They'll take care of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, show her as being. There you have it. Welcome aboard, Ms. Noble.
Thank you.
It's going to be an exciting 3 years.
Yes, it is.
Okay, and now we'll have the swearing in for Councilman Joe Weaver.
Okay. Please state your full name.
I, Joseph B. Weaver, Jr.,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Oklahoma,
and the Constitution of the State of Oklahoma,
and that I will not knowingly receive,
and that I will not knowingly receive,
directly or indirectly,
directly or indirectly,
any money or other valuable thing
any money or any other valuable thing
for the performance or non-performance
for the performance or
of
non-performance
any act or duty
of any act or duty
pertaining to my office
pertaining to my office
other than the compensation allowed by law.
other than the compensation allowed by law.
And I further swear
I further swear
that I will faithfully discharge
that I will faithfully discharge
my duties of the office
my duties of the office
of City of Stillwater Counselor, Office Number 1,
City of Stillwater Counselor, Office Number 1,
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Welcome back.
We missed you, Mr. Jones.
Yeah, I know you did.
Okay. Next on the agenda, and we're going to postpone until our next meeting, the election of vice mayor, which takes us down to general orders. A, contract for staffing of airport control tower and associated budget amendment. Kelly, is
Okay,
it you
well,
or-
I'm going to invite Gary Johnston up in a moment, but when we first prepared the agenda and prepared this budget update, there's been a lot of changes going on with the closing of the 149 air traffic control towers in the country. We thought it was going to close on April 22nd. We had short notice of that, and so this agenda was prepared. As late as Friday, there's been a change in the closing dates for those airports. Our closing date has been changed to June the 15th, as I understand. We decided to go ahead with the meeting. It's still action that needs to be taken, and Mr. Johnson can explain the status and what the contract contains. Just for your information, our control tower has been staffed by a consultant contracted by the FAA at no cost to the city. If that air traffic control goes away, there are some negative impacts, there's some additional costs, and there's some lost revenue. We have not had time to fully analyze those as yet, but it's something that we do need to analyze very carefully over the next few months and report to the council, because it's possible we could have some more long-range decisions on air traffic control in the future. Again, a lot depends on the federal government and what they do with the upcoming budget. So from my perspective, I think the short term in question is what we do between June 15th and the beginning of the next federal fiscal year, which is October 1. So there's about roughly a 4-month period there that's I don't think we're quite prepared to shut down for, but we still need to do some evaluation. So I've asked Mr. Johnson, and he's discussed it with our Stillwater Regional Airport Authority Board, and has talked to the contractor, and tried to look at a reasonable alternative for the council to consider during this interim period. It's somewhat came on us short notice. We've been talking about it for a few months. No one, I don't think, really expected them to shut that quickly, but they have, and so now we're one of 149 airports kind of scrambling to find at least an interim answer. Given that, Gary, would you kind of give the council some background and what the proposal is at this point?
Thank you, Gary Johnson, Stillwater Regional Airport Director. Thank you for being here this evening. And yes, you have a contract in front of you this evening that has been reviewed by the Stillwater Regional Airport Authority with some recommendations from them and from our legal counsel. Those recommendations have been incorporated in this short-term contract to get us through until fiscal year 2014. I will point out we did add an additional year option in there should we want to exercise that option, should we see that that is something we want to continue. Our hope, of course, is that legislatively the funding will be restored. The program now after the 149 towers close, we'll have about 102 towers in it. So the program still exists. The highlights of this contract includes hours of operation from 8 to 6, Monday through Saturday. Our previous hours of operations, or current ones, are 8 to 8, 7 days a week. We also propose closing on Sunday, and we have proposed those hours based on careful analysis of our traffic and making sure that we could cover the peak hours of operation, approximately 85% of the operations that we now have. Currently, we rank fifth in the state in operations with about 60,000 operations a year. That's a little less than 10% of the total operations at the 9 air traffic control towers in the state. This contract would begin June 15th, or should federal funding continue, would not start until federal funding was discontinued. We also have added an hourly rate so that for special events and football days, we could have the tower open during those very busy times when we have the sports events. There is an insurance premium required in the contract, and that's $5,000 for a year. That's a $10 million policy, and you can see all the other coverages in there. The tower would operate as a non-federal control tower, utilizing the same regulations as FAA contract tower or FAA towers. We do own the equipment. We own the frequency for air traffic control tower and ground, and are ready to move forward should you approve this tonight. Otherwise, we would be closing the tower and air traffic control services would cease. That's kind of a nutshell. This has been ongoing since March the 5th. We've had some correspondence with FAA, and as the city manager has shared with you, the final letter came Friday extending this FAA contract tower program until the 15th for all 149 towers. And just as a side note, the 149 towers that they will be taking air traffic control and the safety thereof controls about 7.5 million operations a year. So I'd be very pleased to answer any questions you have.
Just to be clear, there's not going to be any interruption in the tower operation going from today on to June 15th, correct?
That is correct. That's been kind of our goal from the airport authority, and for myself, is to not have any interruption in service.
This contract is not required in order to guarantee that service to June 15th.
No, it is not. It's the FAA will fund it through June 15th.
Okay.
And I would reiterate that the airport authority and myself believe that air traffic control in the national airspace system is the responsibility of the FAA. It is not the responsibility of the state of Oklahoma, of the Stillwater Regional Airport Authority, or the city of Stillwater. But this is such a safety factor that many of the airports and communities or universities are picking up the cost, and some of the universities operate the airports, and so they're evaluating that too. So we intend to continue in Washington to beat the drum and to get this program back where it should be.
You know, it's kind of a vulnerable situation, or a volatile situation. We don't know all the answers yet. I think the airports all over the country are expressing the same thing. We believe it's a federal interest, but until that's fully resolved, we have this interim gap. One of the good things that I wanted to appreciate Gary working with the consultant in that this is a flexible contract for that interim period. Again, as it appears right now, June 15th to September 30th is an uncertain time. This contract, should they extend again 30 days, we don't have to begin this contract. This contract, and Gary said, only begins after the federal funds cease.
Would it be
But
brought back to the council?
No, this would, if it's approved tonight, and if the FAA continues with their closing June 15th, June 16th, these people would be working under this contract approved tonight.
Okay.
On the other side, should something happen, I don't foresee how it would happen, but let's say in July, the Federal Aviation Administration stepped back in and picked up funding again, the contract would automatically terminate at that point as well. So it's only a commitment during this period of time on an as-needed basis. So it gives us some flexibility. We can talk about the second item on the agenda will be an appropriation for this. If council desires to go ahead with the contract, I will be making some adjustments to that appropriation. I don't think we'll need to appropriate quite as much money as we'd originally intended. This appropriation amount was estimated when we thought we were going to be closing, it'd be closed end of April. So it's a little different, and I'll explain those costs.
So they are on a September 30 fiscal year,
They are, that's correct.
October 1 to June to September.
and the sequester was to what time, between now and September 30th, or?
Well, I think
It
the
was going to be immediate at
sequester,
the beginning, but.
right, I think the sequester will be ongoing. This is, of course, this year's sequester. We're not sure what will happen in the FY 214 sequester. or
Unless
how
the
that-
legislature works something out.
Right, right.
And so we're not critical emergency tonight.
No, we're not. I mean, we're going to be operating till June 15th. That's correct.
And it could be extended.
And it could be extended.
Councilor Reeves.
Just thinking out loud here, one possibility might be to approve the agreement, but not to actually authorize the appropriation of the funds. And as we get closer to when we actually know what that amount of money is, we could then at a subsequent council meeting appropriate the funds, but the contract would already be negotiated and in place.
And that's totally possible. At this point, the potential, originally we had 137, I think it's about 104. But if you choose not to appropriate that this evening, that's totally okay. But since we are in the budget process for the coming year, we'll probably leave that 104 set aside out of the available balance in the budget process in the event that you do choose to appropriate that. I don't want to get it tied up in other commitments in the new budget. But it's either way that you'd like to do that.
Mr. Mayor, I don't take my comments as not being supportive of the tower and the need, and that it's a priority. I just, it just is the way this thing is coming together, not knowing the numbers and not knowing the term puts us in an awkward position.
I completely understand that. I mean, I appreciate that. Mr. Johnson, does anyone have any ideas, or do we know, do we have any ideas of what will be happening in October on this question?
I can give you what I know as of today. Senator Moran and Senator Blumenthal have an amendment. I've seen the amendment that they're going to call for a vote that will put the funding back in this year in fiscal year 2013 for the funding of the contract tower to continue operation. They were denied a vote earlier on this, and their second move will be to place it in the 2014 budget. But his comment to the Senate was, I'm not going away on this one. So,
And by no means am I implying that I expect you to know what they possibly could do in Washington, because that's just not even fair. But
well,
I didn't know what feelings or what you were hearing.
that's our best approach right now from U.S. Contract Tower Association and American Association of Airport Executives. That's where we're working. And they had 26 co-sponsors to the bill when it was denied a vote. So they're wanting to bring that back. And I don't know if you're aware, but all of Oklahoma's congressional delegation wrote support letters, our legislators and senators.
I recall from last Friday, they were talking about the data that they based the allocations on was very old data and needed to be updated based on what you just said earlier about our airport being more heavily used than most in the state. We ought to stand fairly well in terms of updating of those data.
I think that's a very good observation, and unfortunately, they've not used the operations as a point of where they close these towers. They picked 150,000 operations, which meant they could do anything with the contract towers. We ranked 97th in operations out of 251, and I felt like if there were cuts, we would be in better shape than all those ranked less than us. To my surprise, that didn't hold any weight. So anyway, hopefully that will help us, Councilman Weaver.
I have a question that I should know, but I don't. Gary, as I understand, and I should know this, I shouldn't maybe be asking you, but they have not even approved a 2013 budget yet,
They have not. That's my understanding.
which is our problem.
Yeah.
So 2014 could be a long time coming unless we can get a continuing resolution.
It could be, and I agree with that. It's all unsure. It seems as if they're trying to work together a little bit better than they have in the past, but that doesn't mean that all three branches are working together, so to speak. So,
I would,
Go ahead.
just to respond to a couple of things that were asked about, again, I would like to reiterate, if the contract's approved, no monies will be expended unless FAA actually ceases funding the operation. That's when it would kick in. The maximum cap on this would be $104,000 for this initial term. The question about approving the contract and then appropriating later, I would defer to Mr. Dorman, but I don't believe you can authorize a contract if you don't have money appropriated for it. I think you have to do the appropriation prior to the contract.
Well, there would need to be funding available within this fiscal year, and the other thing that you're running into is your fiscal year is about to lapse, so you might run out of time to appropriate before the,
The funds are available, they just aren't appropriated for this purpose, and so you have to have that appropriation for this purpose prior to approving the contract, or simultaneous.
Legal quick, but if we appropriate, we still have 90 days at the close of fiscal year to,
And if
you'll have
for
to
some,
appropriate
we have
within
to
this
encumber?
year.
right, and if for some reason this contract is never effectuated before September, the project ceases and the funds revert to the general fund balance where it came from. So
Yeah, I understand.
it's not going anywhere.
That's true.
There are so many moving parts to this that I know things have happened real fast from early February or early March to now, to go from we're just cruising right along to crisis moment. I guess what I'm really trying to say here is tell me if I'm off base in how I'm seeing this and how this is shaking out. We go from cruising right along to here it comes. You've got till, I think it was April 22nd, 23rd, somewhere in there. Right. And so we come up with this concept of general fund stepping in to fund the difference. And with the idea of we'll possibly fund it until October 1 with the idea of with FAA's funding being back in place to where they had it. Well, that puts us in the position of having to make decisions based on what we think the federal government might do, not an enviable position for anybody. The other way I'm looking at this is that this was a benefit at our city airport that was being funded by somebody else. And the private sector in me is looking at this like we just lost a big customer. So what do we need to do to deal with losing a big customer? How do we provide the services, the benefits, the level that we are at after losing a customer or a funding source. And I know we haven't had time yet to fully analyze what airport through operations can fully do. I know one of my holdups or fears on this is what can the airport do within their operations to be contributing or be paying for this service? And I know we haven't had time, so I'm not asking for an answer. Sure. But I know that is one of my major questions, and it's one of those that's, I don't want to put us in a position, us or future councils, in a position where the tower is just part of the budget without an analysis of how that cost unit can be paying for that service. And so is that analysis part of what is going to be accomplished within the next 4 months?
It sure is. That's a very good question, and that is really ongoing. I think Mr. Galloway will tell you I came in with several options if this thing moved forward. But as far as thoroughly investigating them, we have probably 4 contractors that we're aware of that might be interested. There are some other options that could be investigated, such as we employ the air traffic controllers. There could be some joint agreements with other entities, such as Oklahoma State or the Air Force. All of those things are going to take time to weigh out as to what might be the best approach.
But really, my question wasn't so much on how do we get the people that know what they're doing, or what's the cost to the people that we know what we're doing. My question really was more on the revenue and expense side the airport currently has, and what can be different there so that either increased revenue or reallocated expenses to be going to what would be this 104 to get us through the next several months, or maybe more importantly, or the longer term approach is what can the airport do to be funding the tower as opposed to just increasing the budget of the airport?
Yeah,
That's really the questions that I'm interested in.
sure.
That goes, back, at least from the administration's standpoint in this recommendation. This is certainly not a recommendation for continuous subsidizing from the general fund of this service. This is only a temporary till September 30th, if need be. And with that, to make this same analysis, to bring back to this council a full study of the economic impacts of not having it, as well as looking at alternative ways that this could be funded, other than general fund source, which goes back to the very issue that you're bringing.
Well,
So all of those will be included in an analysis that's presented to this council before anything else is done.
And I know when we've had these conversations, there are some expenses for it not being manned that I know I hadn't contemplated. An increase in our insurance, for example. Not only lost revenue by it not being manned, but we have an increase in other expenses for it not being manned. So I mean, this thing is cut in several different directions. This is not a soundbite 20-second explanation issue.
Yeah, sure, and I agree with that.
Yeah, if the air traffic control, there's a lot of losses. Reduce landing fees, reduce fuel sales because fewer airplanes will come here without the control, increased insurance rates. So and we have not had a chance to really analyze all those yet. And we really need to get into an in-depth financial analysis of that.
Somebody have any other questions for Mr. Johnson?
I think,
Not at this time, Mayor.
I concur with what the conversation has been of what we ought to do, so.
Well, the recommendation is to authorize the contract, which is solely on a month-to-month basis, not to go beyond September 30th at this point, and to make an appropriation of $104,000, not to exceed that amount.
Is that the next item, or is that included?
That would be both items together, of what I just stated.
I would make a motion to that effect with the caveat that if the funds aren't needed for this express purpose, they revert back to the general fund.
Absolutely.
And I'll second your motion.
Okay, so just to make sure here, the recommendation and the motion is to accept the recommendation, but the recommendation is to approve this contract and the budget appropriation of
$104,000.
$104,000. Okay.
And if these funds are not needed for that express purpose and that purpose only, they revert back to the general fund and not be left in the authority.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion or further questions on this?
Not at this time, Mayor.
Okay, so are we ready to vote?
Yes, sir.
Let's vote. Okay, and that passes 5-0. You're saying that was 1 and 2, is that really, okay, that's all within A?
Yeah, the motion was to approve the contract and appropriate $104,000.
All within A, okay. That takes us down to item B under general orders and a 2013 to 14 budget update.
Yeah, this is just a brief update. We have been working on, not just the year, we've been working on other things. Looking at our projections of revenues for the coming year. Finance has been working very diligently with that. The SUA has been looking at their trends and making projections. And we pretty well got that as of Friday. The admin team met and looked at all of this. For the general fund and the SUA combined, the two operating budgets, we're projecting an increase over last year's original budget of 4.3%. Last year, we had an original budget of those two funds of $98 million. We're expecting that to increase approximately $4 million for the coming year. For all funds of the city, debt service fund, grant funds, stormwater fund, all of our restricted funds, when you put the entirety together, last year's total expenditures in the city were, I recall, 102 million, I believe, and that will increase about 7% this year. But I want to point that out, that it's not truly a 7% growth in revenues. The 4% in SUA and general fund is based on sales tax growth and utility sales. In all of our restricted funds, the capital, we've approved some contracts for water and sewer improvements, so we're going to be spending more capital payments to the tune of about $1 million more out of the capital improvement fund than we did last year.
And was that's money that had been collected in
It's already
previous
been
years?
collected in previous years. It's just
We're
that
now spending the money
gonna
that we've
be-
been saving.
Yes, we've approved those financing, and so that expenditure will show up. We also had applied for a FEMA grant for a drainage study. Again, that's pending, but it's anticipated that that grant would come forth this year, which is about close to another $2 million. So there's about $3 million of additional expenditures this year that are either grants or increase in debt service payments. Those aren't truly based on normal growth of revenue. And we'll get into that in much more detail when we have our presentation. All this information goes to the Operations Management Group tomorrow. Admin team's going to go through the last fine-tuning on it tomorrow and give this to the Operations Group. All of the managers of the Operations Group have been working very diligently at all of the capital equipment needs that they have deferred over the last 3 years due to the downturn in the economy. We won't be able to catch up on all of those, but we'll be looking at which capital equipment we can incorporate back into the budget. They'll be making their recommendations similar to the way they did last year. I anticipate making the first full public presentation to the council for our first true workshop at a special meeting on April 29th. We have a study session on April 22nd. That's been set up to be your next session in the visiting process that we started last month out at the Holiday Inn. So April will be a little bit busy. The 22nd will be that next visiting session. And on the 29th, we'll have a full-blown presentation of the draft budget to get council discussion, questions. We'll go back to the drawing table after that with the ops group, admin team, answer questions of the council, make modifications according to what council suggests, and then get prepared for another session with the council and a public hearing with input after that. So we are on track, and just wanted to give you, at least we're not looking at a decrease this year. Sales tax started out much more than 4%, but it's leveled off, it's coming back down. And it looks, we've had some decreases in some rental fees, some registration fees to offset that. So there's been some increases and decreases, but overall, we're pretty comfortable with a 4% growth outlook for the coming year, and that's better than what we looked at last year. We looked a little over 2% last year, so things are turning up.
Any questions for Mr. Galloway on this matter? Okay. Those are all the items on our agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
And a second. And that passes 5-0. We are adjourned.